You know, usually when you're driving down the interstate and this massive, like 80,000-pound semi-truck pulls up right alongside you, you probably just see this giant wall of metal.
Yeah, it just kind of blends right into the background of daily life.
Right. You grip the steering wheel a little tighter, keep an eye on your blind spots, and maybe, speed up a bit to get past it. To most of us, it's just this totally utilitarian machine moving boxes from point A to point B.
We completely take the logistics of it for granted. I mean, we really do.
We do. But when you actually look under the hood of how that truck is permitted to be on the road, suddenly that wall of metal kind of devolves. What you are actually looking at is this rolling, hyper-complex financial paradox. We're looking at a landscape of incredibly high-stakes risk management.
Oh, absolutely. It is the absolute definition of a fragile but totally essential ecosystem.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a topic that, honestly, on the surface, it sounds like dry paperwork, but it's actually anything but. We've got a really solid stack of sources for this one.
Yeah, we do.
Our foundational text is this highly detailed 2026 industry guide, specifically focused on trucking insurance, so physical damage and workers' compensation. And we are cross-referencing that guide with a pile of market research, some industry articles, and our own notes on supply chain dynamics to really extract the most important insights.
And if you're wondering, why should I care about the minutia of commercial insurance underwriting? Well, absolutely everything you buy requires a truck.
Right. Every single thing.
The food in your refrigerator, the clothes you are wearing right now, the materials building the homes in your neighborhood, it all gets to you on a truck.
Precisely. By looking at what is costing trucking companies the most money right now, we're basically getting a front row seat to the broad impacts of high-tech inflation, the legal complexities of the gig economy, and frankly, the hidden vulnerabilities within our global supply chains.
It really is a backdoor into understanding the whole economy right now.
It totally is. So let's unpack this systematically. Let's start with the physical asset itself, the truck. It's incredibly counterintuitive that something as inherently dangerous as a Class 8 semi-truck isn't actually subjected to blanket federal insurance mandates for the vehicle itself.
Right. It goes completely against common sense. If we look at the regulations from the FMCSA, that's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, they actually do not federally require physical damage coverage.
Wait, really? Nothing at all for the truck?
Not federally, no. Their focus is entirely outward-facing. So the FMCSA mandates public liability insurance.
Okay, meaning if the truck hits your personal vehicle, you're covered.
Exactly. And they mandate cargo protection to ensure the shippers don't lose the value of their goods. But the actual cab and trailer, the federal government leaves that policing entirely up to the private market.
That is wild. But I mean, the private market enforces it pretty ruthlessly, right?
Oh, ruthlessly. In the real world, physical damage coverage is effectively mandatory.
It kind of reminds me of the dynamics of buying a new smartphone. Like you drop $1,000 on a phone, and the law certainly doesn't make you buy a heavy-duty protective case.
Right. The government does not care about your screen.
The government has zero interest in whether you shatter your screen. But the cellular carrier who is financing your phone over a 36-month contract, they will absolutely mandate that you carry an insurance policy on that device.
That is a highly accurate parallel, actually. The federal government steps back, but the lenders, the leasing companies, the freight brokers, and the shippers step in.
They force the issue.
Exactly. If a trucking company signs an equipment financing agreement, the bank will mandate physical damage protection equal to the actual cash value of the equipment. You literally cannot secure the capital to operate without it.
And is this just an American thing?
Not at all.
Yeah.
The Canadian market mirrors this perfectly. Provincial insurers, fleet financing providers, and contract freight agreements across the border, they all require this coverage, regardless of what the federal transportation laws actually say.
Okay, so when a fleet is forced by these financial institutions to actually buy coverage, they're generally looking at three distinct buckets, right? First, you have collision coverage.
Right, which covers the physical impacts, rollovers, jackknives, bridge strikes, things like that.
Then you have comprehensive coverage. That handles the non-collision events, like fire, hail, flooding. And there's an area here that the 2026 data highlights as a profound concern for underwriters right now, which is cargo theft and organized trucking fraud.
Oh, man. The evolution of that organized fraud is just staggering. We aren't just talking about someone, cutting a padlock at a truck stop in the middle of the night anymore.
Way bigger than that.
Way bigger. Cargo theft rings in this 2025-2026 window, they operate like sophisticated cyber syndicates.
Wow.
They use fictitious pickups, double brokering scams, and identity theft to electronically redirect high-value freight. So when a loaded trailer just vanishes because the paperwork was spoofed, that falls squarely onto comprehensive claims, and the dollar amounts are substantial.
That is insane. And then finally, there's specified perils, which basically operates as a cheaper, stripped-down alternative for smaller fleets.
Yeah.
It only covers named risks like, say, a windstorm or an explosion, just to keep their premiums manageable.
Exactly. It's the budget option.
But I want to analyze the collision aspect for a second, because the numbers here highlight a really fascinating contradiction.
The tech paradox.
Yes, the 2026 data shows that modern trucks are basically supercomputers on wheels now. They are packed with ADS, advanced driver assistance systems. We're talking about lane departure warnings, automatic emergency braking, incredibly sophisticated radar arrays.
They are loaded with sensors.
Right. So if the machines are structurally safer and they're actively avoiding accidents, shouldn't collision insurance logically be getting radically cheaper?
You would certainly expect a reciprocal drop in premiums. I mean, it makes logical sense, but this introduces what the commercial auto industry calls the repair cost inflation paradox.
Repair cost inflation. Unpack that for us.
So the ADS technology undoubtedly prevents a certain percentage of crashes. It works. However, when a crash does eventually happen, the repair mechanics are astronomically expensive.
Because a bumper isn't just a piece of stamped steel anymore, is it?
Far from it. If a truck just bumps a loading dock today, you aren't just bending metal back into place. That bumper houses proximity sensors, forward-facing radar, all sorts of tech.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and replacing those components requires specialized bays, proprietary manufacturer software, and highly trained technicians just to recalibrate the systems. Add in ongoing semiconductor shortages and broader equipment inflation, and the cost of parts remains artificially elevated.
So basically, the parts are super expensive, the labor is highly specialized, and the trucks hold their value. Does this create a situation where even minor accidents trigger a total loss?
That's exactly the mechanism driving the premiums up. An underwriter looks at the salvage value of the truck, the cost of the proprietary parts, the extended downtime just waiting for those parts, and the inflated labor rate.
And they just do the math.
Right. It frequently becomes cheaper for the insurance company to declare a completely functional truck a total loss rather than attempt to repair and recalibrate the safety tech.
That is so backward. The very safety technology designed to mitigate financial loss is causing the vehicles to be mathematically written off?
It is a massive headache for the industry. And when you factor in the broader legal environment, specifically what they call nuclear verdicts, the pricing pressure makes total sense.
Okay, yeah, a nuclear verdict. That's essentially a multi-million-dollar jury award against a trucking company, right?
Exactly. And while those payouts primarily drain liability insurance, they completely terrify the reinsurance markets.
And reinsurance is basically the insurance that insurance companies buy to protect themselves.
Spot on. When those reinsurers see profitability draining from the commercial auto sector, they raise their rates universally. That trickles down and makes physical damage coverage more expensive for everyone. It creates this compound inflation effect across the entire policy.
Man. So if forecasting the repair costs of a predictable sensor-packed machine is turning the actuarial tables upside down, evaluating the human labor force driving those machines must be an entirely different caliber of complex.
Oh, it's a minefield.
The transition from the vehicle to the driver introduces a profound legal gray area, specifically regarding employment classification.
Right. We are stepping into the nuances of workers' compensation now. In a standard corporate environment, the structure is simple. Statutory workers' compensation provides medical expenses, lost wages, disability, and death benefits to employees injured while working.
The employer pays the premium, and the coverage is mandated by law. Super straightforward.
Super straightforward. But commercial trucking relies on a fundamentally different labor model.
Right. The industry leans heavily on independent contractors, lease owner-operators, and subcontracted drivers, rather than traditional W-2 employees.
Which creates a highly litigious divide between statutory workers' compensation and occupational accident insurance, which the industry calls OCAIC.
Okay, cool.
Because independent contractors are legally responsible for their own injury protection, many owner-operators purchase these OCAC policies. OCAC covers accidental injuries and provides medical reimbursement, but the benefits are heavily capped. The coverage parameters are frequently disputed by adjusters, and critically, it does not offer the legal shield of statutory workers' comp.
This sounds exactly like the gig economy battles we've observed over the last few years with ride-sharing platforms and food delivery apps, but scaled up to an industrial level.
It's the exact same tension, yes,
Mm.
deciding whether a worker is an autonomous contractor or a functional employee.
And the 2026 guide notes that driver misclassification is actually one of the industry's absolute largest legal exposures right now. If a government agency audits a fleet and determines they have been treating independent contractors like employees, like dictating their schedules, enforcing specific routes, mandating uniforms, that fleet faces severe consequences.
Devastating consequences. They can be hit with retroactive premiums, back taxes, and massive class action lawsuits.
And the logistical realities of trucking have to multiply that legal exposure.
Right.
I mean, think about the geographical nature of the job. You have drivers constantly crossing state and provincial lines.
That is the multi-state jurisdiction problem, and it is a nightmare.
Right. If you're listening to this on your commute right now, imagine trying to figure out which state's labor laws apply to your job on any given Tuesday. Let's run a hypothetical. Let's say a driver is formally hired by a carrier based in Florida, but the driver actually resides in Ohio. And then, unfortunately, they get severely injured while hauling a load through a way station in Texas. Whose rules apply?
It is an absolute jurisdictional turf war. Does the law of the state where the injury occurred apply? Does the state where the payroll is processed take precedence?
What actually happens in practice?
In practice, it often becomes a race. The injured driver's legal counsel rushes to file the claim in the state offering the highest indemnity benefits, while the insurer fights tooth and nail to restrict the claim to a state with more favorable employer laws. Honestly, the legal fees often outpace the actual medical costs.
That is unbelievable. And our sources highlight that Canada is navigating an identical struggle through its provincial workers' compensation boards, right?
Yeah.
Agencies like WorkSafe BC or the WSI in Ontario or CNS in Quebec.
Yes, and the current flashpoint up there is a practice called Driver Inc.
Driver Inc. What is that?
The Driver Inc. model is this fascinating loophole that Canadian authorities are actively trying to close right now. It involves a driver formally incorporating themselves as a completely distinct business entity.
Okay, why would they do that?
They do it to be treated as an independent contractor for tax benefits and specifically to avoid paying into the provincial workers' comp systems.
But functionally, they're operating exactly like full-time employees, right? Like driving exclusively for a single carrier, using the carrier's trucks, and following the carrier's dispatch orders.
Precisely. It's a workaround. The Canadian provincial boards and revenue agencies view this as an orchestrated tax evasion and misclassification scheme. It strips the workers of their statutory workplace protections while giving the carriers an unfair competitive advantage because they're artificially lowering their labor costs.
Wow. Okay, so because this jurisdictional and legal tug-of-war is so outrageously expensive, it seems like the only structural fix for fleets and insurers is to just eliminate the claims entirely.
Exactly. You can't argue over who pays for an injury if the injury never happens in the first place.
Right. But to do that, the industry has to look closely at what is actually sending drivers to the hospital. And frankly, the actuarial data on those injuries totally contradicts public perception.
It really does. People always assume it's the big crashes.
Yeah, it's so easy to get distracted by the high-profile highway pileups that make the evening news. But when you look at the raw data in these reports, it's the slow attritional damage that drains profitability. The most frequent injuries are remarkably mundane.
Highly mundane. We see a massive volume of severe musculoskeletal injuries, debilitating back and shoulder strains. We also see constant slip and fall incidents.
Right, because drivers are navigating icy trailers or treacherous loading docks covered in grease. Or they simply misjudge the step out of the cab at a rain-slicked fuel island and end up shattering an ankle.
It happens all the time. Then there is the cargo handling aspect, securing heavy chains, maneuvering oversized tarps in high winds.
And perhaps the most insidious factor mentioned in the sources, repetitive stress injuries.
Yes, the vibration exposure.
Decades of sitting behind the wheel exposes the human body to continuous, low-frequency, whole-body vibration from the road. Over a 20-year career, that specific vibration exposure physically degrades the spine.
It really is a slow burn. The occupation itself is the real hazard. And the environmental risks shift dramatically depending on the sector, too. Long-haul trucking deals primarily with ergonomic stress, chronic fatigue, sleep disorders, and severe isolation.
But if you analyze oilfield trucking, the environment is entirely different.
Completely different. Oil field operations involve hauling frac sand and heavy machinery across unpaved, volatile lease roads. So the drivers face extreme slip hazards in mud and snow, constant heavy lifting, and exposure to hazardous materials.
Which explains why workers' compensation rates for oil field operations remain significantly above the national industry average in 2026.
Exactly. That elevated environmental risk is priced right in.
So the insurers have to price all of these variables. They obviously look at the size of the payroll, but they also scrutinize driver turnover.
Right, because high turnover indicates a reliance on inexperienced drivers, which statistically correlates with higher injury frequencies.
They also heavily weigh DOT violations. The Department of Transportation logs infractions, right? Like whether a driver breached their regulated hours of service by driving too long without rest, or if they skipped a mandatory pre-trip inspection.
All of those data points feed directly into the underwriting algorithm.
Which actually leads to a really counterintuitive conclusion.
Yeah.
Given the vibration degradation, the multi-state legal battles, the driver shortages, and the constant threat of misclassification lawsuits, one would naturally assume workers' compensation is a massive loss leader for insurance companies.
Right, you'd think they are bleeding money, but the reality is quite the opposite. Despite all of those systemic pressures and rising medical inflation, workers' compensation remains one of the most profitable commercial insurance lines.
Wait, really? How is that possible?
Because of the industry's ruthless efficiency and pricing risk, the insurers aren't just blindly absorbing the costs, they are mathematically isolating the bad actors. Fleets that maintain rigorous safety programs, low injury frequencies, and pristine DOT records are rewarded with highly favorable pricing. The insurers secure a healthy, predictable margin on the safe fleets, and they penalize the risky operations with premiums so exorbitant they are either forced to reform or go out of business entirely.
It's basically a self-correcting financial mechanism.
Exactly. It forces safety through economics.
So, if the traditional methods of evaluating risk are no longer sufficient to keep premiums affordable, fleets have to adopt technological solutions to survive the 2026 landscape. Hoping a driver remembers to hold the handrail at the fuel island just isn't a strategy anymore.
No, hope is not a strategy.
The industry is utilizing a two-pronged approach now: structural preventative maintenance and highly integrated AI surveillance.
Right. So on the physical equipment side, reducing risk means deploying advanced telematics. They monitor tire pressure and brake wear in real time, preventing blowouts before they ever happen.
And to combat the cargo theft syndicates we discussed earlier.
Fleets are implementing geofencing, requiring secure, verified parking, and using redundant GPS tracking. They also engage in insurance optimization, so conducting rigorous annual audits to ensure they aren't overpaying to insure a rapidly depreciating asset.
Or underinsuring a truck whose replacement value has spiked due to supply chain issues.
Exactly. It's about maintaining absolute mathematical precision.
But the technology aimed at injury prevention on the human side, well, that is where the landscape fundamentally shifts. Modern fleets are utilizing driver-facing cameras, AI safety coaching, wearables that monitor fatigue through biometric markers, and comprehensive electronic safety reporting. Let's walk through the data pipeline of how this actually affects a company's bottom line.
Sure. The key metric here is the EMR, the Experience Modification Rate.
Okay, EMR.
It is the multiplier used by insurers to calculate a fleet's workers' comp premium, and it's based on their historical claims frequency compared to the industry average.
Got it.
An EMR of 1.0 is perfectly average. An EMR of 0.8 means the fleet enjoys a 20% discount on their premiums.
And an EMR of 1.2 means they are hit with a 20% penalty.
Correct. So how does the technology alter that number? If an AI-enabled camera detects a driver braking too hard or drifting out of a lane, it doesn't just record the event. It alerts the fleet safety manager, who then initiates targeted coaching with that specific driver.
And the underwriters can see that.
Yes. The underwriters view the logs of those proactive interventions. The technology proves to the insurance company that the fleet is actively mitigating risk. That drives down the frequency of actual accidents, which directly lowers the EMR multiplier.
Okay, but we should acknowledge the inherent tension this creates regarding driver autonomy. We're talking about outfitting cabs with cameras that analyze eye movements and wearables that track physiological fatigue. From the perspective of the driver, it introduces a level of surveillance that feels highly invasive.
Oh, that tension is undeniable. It is a massive central debate within the labor force right now. However, analyzing this objectively from the insurer's perspective in 2026, subjective trust is simply no longer mathematically viable.
The numbers just don't support it anymore.
Exactly. The claims inflation is too severe, and the legal landscape surrounding misclassification is way too hostile. An underwriter can't just take a fleet manager's word that their independent contractors are well-rested and operating safely.
They require empirical telemetry data to actually justify giving out those discounts.
The hard data is the only mechanism capable of ensuring compliance and separating the safe fleets from the liabilities. And looking ahead to 2028, the sources are completely unified on the trend. The industry will see even stricter asset valuation scrutiny, deeper integration of AI in the actual underwriting algorithms, and near universal adoption of these safety technologies.
Well, let's bring all these threads together for a minute. We started by looking at a standard semi-truck on the highway, and we've peeled back the layers to reveal a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem operating just out of sight.
It really is a hidden world.
It is. We've seen that trucking insurance isn't merely administrative overhead. It's a incredibly high-stakes balancing act between repairing hyper-advanced ADS sensors, navigating multi-state labor laws regarding gig worker classifications, and deploying deep biometric surveillance to prevent attritional injuries. All of these mechanisms are working furiously behind the scenes to price risk accurately, ensuring that the fleets can afford to operate, and the global supply chain doesn't just collapse into the weight of its own legal and physical liabilities.
It is a remarkably complex system, constantly iterating and adapting to new economic pressures.
It truly is. So to you, our listener, the next time you pass one of those 18-wheelers on the interstate, I want you to look past the metal and think about the rolling financial paradox making that journey possible. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
This is a good one.
We talked extensively about driver-facing cameras, AI coaching, and biometric wearables designed to monitor the human element. But as this technology accelerates, what happens when autonomous driving systems eventually take the human out of the cab entirely? If the risk of fatigue, misclassification, and human error drops to absolute zero, what happens to this massive workers' compensation and liability industry when the driver is just a string of software code? Who pays the premium then?
That is the defining question the actuarial world will have to answer in the coming decade.
Something to consider next time you're out on the highway. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.